Welcome everyone to Vidit Gujrathi taking on Parham Maghsoodloo. There you see Parham on your screen. Vidit enters, a shake of hands, and what a clash we have. Both of them have had such amazing games against each other because it's a clash of styles. Vidit is more positional in nature, Parham is more aggressive, creative, and today we can expect a fighting game of chess. Both of them lost their first rounds at the Chennai Grand Masters. This is round number 2. Vidit had a heartbreaking loss against Arjun. Parham was outplayed by MVL. E4 is how Parham begins this game. Generally, Parham likes to play D4, but well, when you are a 2700 plus player, you can definitely serve with both your hands. Now E4, and Vidit, as always, just in his meditative pose, getting ready for the battle. 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment is the time control here, and Vidit zones in on the board and plays E5. Parham brings his knight out to F3. And Vidit plays knight to C6. We'll see how this game continues. Oh, he goes for the Rui Lopez, not the Italian game with bishop C4. He goes for bishop B5. And Vidit can play A6 here, but he goes for knight F6, which is known as the Berlin. The Berlin endgame comes after short castles, but I believe that Parham might go for the anti-Berlin with D3. That's exactly what he does. D3 is on the board. Well, D3 leads to more fighting games in general, but Vidit is such a big expert at these lines with black. He's been playing it for years. He understands them very well. It's very difficult to beat him here. Bishop C5 played. Now Parham takes the knight, and this exchange makes the position imbalanced in a way where white has now the better pawn structure, but black has the bishop pair. Remember, you can't win a pawn here because of queen d4 with a double attack on f2 and e5. So firstly, Parham castles here. Now if you are threatening the pawn on e5. So Vidit goes knight to d7, defending the pawn. While white has excellent development, what black has is the bishop pair here. So in long term, there might be better chances, but d4 is how white wants to play next. Let's see how Vidit continues here. He plays his pawn to h6. Very interesting play. I believe that after d4, what Vidit wants to do is play bishop to d6, maintaining that structure. Let's see if Parham does that. No, first he goes rook e1, just trying to build up the position. A very common plan here is knight to d2 to f1 to g3. Vidit castles it out here, and Parham, I believe, is going to just go knight d2. Yes, he plays his knight to d2 with the plan that we just mentioned, knight f1, knight g3. And I think it makes a lot of sense to play this way, that you are not rushing into anything, just building up your position. Rook e8, again a useful move by Vidit. And with this, he makes a square for his knight to go to f8 and eventually to e6 or g6. Knight f1 played. Through these moves, you can realize that both the players are not in any hurry to create some play. They're just trying to build up a position. a5 stops the expansion with b4, a4. Knight comes to g3. And you want to maybe gain even more space on the queen side. a4, ambitious play here by Vidit, because this pawn can become a weakness in the future, but for now it is clamping down white's position h3 played by Parham, and an idea here is knight h2, queen f3, knight g4, and use all your pieces for the attack. That's how I believe Parham is looking at the position. Knight f8 by Vidit. And now there's a small tactical opportunity that Parham has to take here, because if rook takes, you have d4. But Vidit can strike back with bishop f2 and then take on e5. Parham says, I don't want to get into all these complications. I'm just simply moving my queen to c2. Queen comes into f6. It's actually Vidit who is now putting some pressure. He wants bishop h3 takes, queen takes f3. That is his idea. And now Parham plays his queen to e2. So this entire idea with queen c2 and e2 is not particularly something that gives white any edge. In fact, now Vidit brings his knight to g6 with the idea of putting it on f4 and putting pressure on the white camp. I like black's position, but Parham goes knight f5, knight h5, attacking the queen on f6. Well, you have to move your queen away. Queen e6 seems like a natural move here. He plays queen to d6. And Parham now brings bishop to d2. He's playing a little differently, you feel it. Like Parham is making all these moves which are maybe just little moves, trying to keep the game going, not doing anything directly. Maybe it's just a strategy that he's following here to bring Vidit out of his comfort zone. But Vidit is very much in his comfort zone here. He has a very nice position. He goes pawn to d4. Now, having the rook opposite the queen is definitely something that Parham should be a bit worried about. But I don't think he is particularly. Takes on d4. And now he takes back. C takes d4. Interesting to see how Vidit will continue, because these two pawns are pretty strong. But whoa, he goes f5. I think he's basically hoping that plays e5 here, and after queen e7 with the idea of bishop e6, bishop d5, this is actually a better position for black. So Parham comes back with his knight to g3. And Vidit can take here on e4, but instead he plays bishop d7. I love the move that Parham has made. Now this is a very deep move. Queen c4 check. Why? Because he's going to actually reroute his queen to c2. You can see how the game went from queen d1 to c2 to e2 to c4 to c2. It's made a triangle here, but it has opened up possibilities for Vidit. Look at this for Parham. His queen is excellently positioned on c2, putting pressure on Vidit's camp. And now, where does Vidit play his bishop here? He goes bishop d7. And it's important that he goes there, because if he went bishop d5, then after rook g4, he's put under huge pressure. So bishop d7, Parham brings his other rook into the game. Vidit takes, rook takes e4. Somehow you feel that Vidit's king is a bit lonely after this. White has a bishop looking here, a queen looking here, two knights and a rook that can shift. So all of these possibilities do exist. a3 played here by Vidit. And now he goes b3. just pushes the pawn, and queen to f6. Now, one of the ideas that Vidit has is bishop takes h3 here again, but a check has come in. And now if you play, let's say, a move like king h8, then h4 with the idea of h5 is pretty strong. So he goes queen f7, offering a trade of queen, and I think Parham can avoid it with queen c1. But instead Parham goes h4, and this I am not very sure, because yes, he's going h5, but it allows the trade of queens, and this is good news for Vidit, because now his king is no longer that weak. Yes, it's true that Parham is threatening h5, knight e5 with center control, but rook a4, what an interesting move here by Vidit. h5 played by Parham, knight goes back. Now notice, if you make this weak move like c5, then later on the bishop can come to e6 and attack the a2 pawn. This is not something that you want. So he goes rook e7. It's a crazy move. He's actually giving up a pawn, and this is why Parham Maghsoodloo is such a dangerous opponent. He has 46 seconds and he's playing so risky chess. What is his plan here now? He goes knight e4. He puts his knight there on the e4 square. He's just trying to play for an attack here against the black king. Bishop d4 played. In fact, the better move here was bishop f5. I understand that he might be worried about a potential huge attack with bishop h6 and knight h6, knight f6 check and so on. But he takes here, knight takes, rook takes. Now the problem that Vidit has is that Parham's bishop can come here, and with his rook, they both can attack the g7 pawn. And Vidit has 1 minute on the clock. Parham has 30 seconds. Bishop c3 played. You have to go for a check, otherwise you are busted here. So check. King h2. And now Vidit must defend his pawn on g7. The only way is knight to e6. You can see that the rook is defending here, and if Parham wants to create some play, he needs to block it with knight d2. And he finds it. Knight d2, both players playing some good chess here. And now Vidit must find this idea with rook c1 attacking the bishop, and after knight e4 coming back. And I think the position could end in a repetition here. But Vidit down to like 1 minute and 30 seconds, he's definitely put under a lot of pressure by Parham, who has sacrificed 2 pawns here. Vidit is 2 pawns up, but his king is a bit weak. His bishop is trapped. He cannot go back because check and he loses the bishop. And I think it's a bit of that feeling that he had yesterday, where the nerves are getting on to him. It's not a pleasant situation to be in. As with it, he needs to make his move, but it's not so clear for him. There's also possibility of giving up this bishop and starting to roll your pawns, but so difficult for a human to understand this. And he finally plays knight to c5, which is a big mistake, because he's just given up this pawn. I do understand that Vidit feels that his position is not so bad even after giving up that pawn, but it is trouble time now after king f8. The main problem is that your h6 pawn is weak and the h pawn is tremendously strong for white. He comes back rook g3. Maybe stronger was rook g6 attacking here, but one can understand Parham's decision. He wants to keep everything protected. Once again, Vidit is back in the game. The position is equal. He goes knight e6. Maybe not the best move here. He could have played king f7 or something of that sort. And now Parham finds the right move. He goes rook g6. Now it's not so simple, because c5 played by Vidit, but he's losing the h6 pawn. He's losing it. Takes. Parham Maghsoodloo in the driver's seat now. threatening not just a check on h8 but f6, followed by the h pawn rushing down the board. So knight comes to d4. And he goes knight to e4. He wants to perhaps bring his knight in. Bishop f5 keeps the game going. If knight takes c5, king g7 attacking the rook, and the rook is quite trapped here. And in fact, such a variation is very difficult to find. So Vidit goes b6. But this is the final error of the game. This bishop f5 followed by king g7 was such a nice variation. But now check. And it's the position is so difficult, because now if king g7, I have h6 followed by rook f7. So check, and where does Vidit move his king? If king e7, still the h pawn is just a monster. It's just rushing to become a queen. And I guess Vidit, with very little time, couldn't assess these nuances in the position. He goes king to g8 with just 4 seconds on the clock. He made this move. Parham gives another check, and his idea now is push. Can you go king h7, but then there is knight f6 followed by rook g8 mate, so you have to go king h8. But now it's a mating attack. Just knight f6 check. I don't see it. Parham has launched an amazing attack here. Rook g8 is a mate, so bishop e6 played, and now h6 with the idea of rook g7, rook h7 mate. Vidit has nothing moving here. His knight cannot move because of this bishop. His pawns are not really pushing ahead. He's just completely landed in a lost situation. Goes bishop f7, but now Parham knows that he's winning totally. Rook to g7 is a fantastic move, threatening a mate here. And I believe Vidit is just lost. It's not even that he's losing a piece. He just cannot stop that mate. He resigns there. Parham Maghsoodloo wins the first game of the tournament in the second round. But what a game this was. I believe that at some point Parham really took the risk that I believe not many players would have. Giving up 2 pawns, putting Vidit on the edge, and that too when he had less time. Parham took this risk. Well, it's just in his blood, it's just his nature to. And there he's saying I should have played h5, bishop h6, some ideas there. While I mean, this is a very genuine conversation between these two people. It's not like Parham wants to show off that he has won and he's seen this, but he genuinely might have these questions. And you can see with it analyzing. Very interesting there, both of them talking to each other. I love how they are analyzing this. I'm going to leave you with their discussions here so that you can hear them.
I didn't like F5.
Rook g3, bishop e8, I think.
It really was rook g3? Yes. I think the rook g6, I think. Rook g6 instead of rook